everybody, thanks for joining me today. We are going to try and hit 3 birds with 1 stone in this video. The first bird is going to be doing a sort of first flight review of this wonderful Carenado Cessna 182 RG2. This is not like the 182T that they released, oh gosh, almost about 3 years ago now. This is the old school 182, and it has retractable landing gear, which is awesome. It's so strange to see a Cessna with retractable landing gear, because everything from the 152, the 172, and the 182, I mean, heck, even the Caravan all has fixed landing gear. So the fact that it has this unique design is pretty cool. The second bird we are going to hit is going to be how to make the most out of the in-game ATC. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be like, oh, it doesn't work at all. Well, I'm with you, but I've found some ways to give yourself the best chances of success in order to have correct sort of altitude assignments and approaches and all that sort of good stuff. So we're going to have a look at that as well. Lastly, we are going to have a look at the GTN 750, because Carenado is starting to pretty much on all their aircraft have them, I don't want to call it native, but you don't need to download anything additional except for the unit itself. You just turn it on in the sort of little tablet and it's good to go. So we're going to have a look at some of the features in there as well. So step one that I like to do for the flight planning is I use Navigraph, which if you're not familiar, it is an awesome subscription service that provides you with all up-to-date flight information, charts, flight planning, and sim brief. So all of it ties together, and it also ties into the GTN 750, which you're going to see some of the cool features of that. So today we've just got a nice simple flight where we're coming from Catalina, and we're going to head up to Santa Barbara. So from Catalina, there's this Victor 27 airway, and then we're going to hit the Ventura VOR, which takes us over to this Quang waypoint. Now, Santa Barbara is kind of a unique airport where really the only precision approaches are runway 7. Runway 25 only has this VOR approach, which is definitely not precision. So to demonstrate reason why I want to land on 25 is if we have a look at the runways, in Navigraph, you also get the wind directions of all the runways at the airport. Now you can see runway 7, which has an ILS and an RNAV, has a tailwind of 11 knots, but runway 25 obviously has a headwind of 11 knots. So we definitely want to land on runway 25 in this little guy. If we were, say, in a corporate jet or something like that, and needed that precision approach, we would be able to load that in. And typically, the ATC in real life and in the game will say, ILS runway 7 in use, landing and departing runway 25. So that's kind of like how it's reported. But what I found is that if you don't select that as the approach, then it might assign you the ILS, because honestly, ATC doesn't know what aircraft you're in. So we've got all of that set here. And then what you want to do is on the options, set your cruising altitude. And then I export it as a flight plan and then load that in the simulator. So we come on over to the world map. We're going to come down to more and load save from this PC. I just put them in my downloads directory, and there it is there. And we can just go ahead and open and just double check what we have going on here. So we've got from Catalina going up that Victor 27 airway, hitting Ventura over to Quang, and then Quang on that VOR 25 approach. The nice thing is, because in Navigraph, I chose that it was the Quang sort of transition, it put it in there. You don't have a way to select a transition in the world map here. It'll just assign it not at random, but as at default. So that's why sometimes you get these wacky flight plans going on, is because you can't select a transition. The only thing that it doesn't do, and this is a limitation of Flight Simulator, is it cannot assign either just an airport without a runway or a parking spot. you do have to pick it. Now, depending on your flight plan that you have loaded in and how complex it is, sometimes this can be a pain. But the best chances of success is do not choose the parking spot from down here on the map. Choose it from the drop down. So we're just going to say parking spot 3. Make sure that it didn't alter your flight plan, which it has not. And then we want to double check that we are at 7,000 feet and we are good to go. So let's go ahead and load on in. All right, so here we are at wonderful Catalina. If you're familiar with my channel, I definitely have flown out of this one a couple times on a few videos. It is one of my favorite airports, and Santa Barbara is also one of my favorite airports. If you haven't flown in and out of here, please check it out. It is very cool. I forget what world update, maybe world update, the second USA world update. It was in there. Now, having a look at the aircraft, we have our static elements turned on. So we have, cones, chocks, power unit, tow bar, the covers, and also the cockpit cover. So a lot of cool static elements that are as options that you can turn on and off. I really enjoy when developers put these things in here because I do like to walk around the aircraft and have a little look. And this is a very beautiful aircraft to have a look at. You can see that the textures are of very high quality, high resolution. Carenado is definitely known for that. This landing gear is so unique. It's just almost like a folding table where they just sort of fold up and tuck right on underneath and slot themselves in there. The front is a little more traditional where it just sort of folds forward underneath the nose there. So that's the outside. Let's go ahead and jump on into the inside and get things fired up. All right, so you can see we just have the default cockpit set up right now. We're going to bring up our tablet and we're going to turn off the static elements. Might as well pop on a pilot. And then if we come over to the next, we can turn on that GTN 750. Once we have that on, we can go ahead and just close this on down. Now I'm going to go through relatively thorough but quick checklists for this. One thing I will say is that the checklist in game, do not use. It is incorrect. It's some twin-engined aircraft. It is not right. I imagine that is just a oversight on somebody's part and the wrong file got added to this. So on Carenado's website, they do have the correct documents for you to download and have a look at. They have normal procedures, emergency procedures, and performance charts. You can also just Google, Cessna 182 RG POH, and it will give you the official document as well. So we're going to go through, and first we just want to make sure that our fuel is on both. We can go ahead and get our prop full forward, mixture full forward. The way that the POH describes priming the engine is by pumping the throttle 1 to 6 times, which I don't know if you would still do that versus in this model we have a primer. I'm guessing because this has a primer, though, we would just use that 1 to 6 times versus using the actual throttle. We want to go ahead and check to make sure that all electronics are turned off, including any lights, avionics. This is a bug. This should be off right now. It's not a huge deal, but this should be off at the moment. I'm sure a quick little hot fix will get that taken care of, because with avionics turned off, that should not be on. So that being said, we have our fuel on, full forward on prop, full rich on mixture. Throttle is cracked. We can go ahead and pop on the battery and alternator and go ahead and actually we can come over here and do a little clear prop. And I'm going to leave the window open because I think the sounds on this are better than usual for Carenado. I think that sounds pretty darn good. The other thing that they've changed the sounds is if I lower the flaps, you can hear that those are definitely unique and different. And apparently they did all of the recordings for this aircraft inside a real Cessna 182 RG. So that is nice to see. All right, so we'll go ahead and get our nav and beacon on, and then we can come down here and pop on our avionics. We just want to make sure that our landing lever is down, green light is on. I want to get a little bit more throttle in here. There we are, right around 1,000 RPMs. Pressures and temperatures are fine. And then we have our wonderful GTN 750 has already booted up. Now, as far as checking things during a run-up, it's typical sort of, get yourself 1,800 RPMs, check your mags. The fuel pump in this is down here. This is used really only in a case of emergencies, but you do want to check it. Turn it on. You just want to see that that fuel pressure goes up, and it does. And then if you want to check your alternator, you can turn that off and check your amp meters up there, turn it back on, and see if that jumps up, and it does. So everything is working as it should be there. Now, let's go ahead and come on over to our Garmin here. Now, we want to check our flight plan, make sure everything is good. Looking through it, we don't have any weirdness going on. It's got the Quang transition. Everything is looking fantastic there, so that is good to see. We can also bring up, by clicking on any waypoint and waypoint info, any of the information that we need for it. So, for example, Navigraph will supply you with unit charts. And any charts that you can get in Navigraph, you can load into here, searching, clicking on waypoints, whatever you want to, you can bring them up in here, which is fantastic. You can also, if you bring back the split here, come back to airport info, we have a list of all frequencies, which is nice to go ahead and tune. So, for example, we need to get the weather before we go any further, and that'll pop it into your standby, and then you can just swap it. And we want to have a look at our altimeter to get that set. I know the altitude here is roughly just below 1,600 feet. Yep, and there we go. And so it's nice to check that. You can also check the weather data by looking at the actual metadata here, and it sort of deciphers it for you. So you can see we got that 240 at 8, which is fantastic because we're going to be taking off at runway 22. You can also bring up any procedures, information about the runways, distances, surfaces, all that sort of stuff. Lots of cool things in here. Well, we've got what we needed. So we can go ahead and put that onto full, because the next thing we need to do is actually tune the departure to get our IFR clearance. So that's 1274 transfer, and that pops it in. We're going to bring up our ATC, and we can request our IFR. Now we're going to get a little bit of information here. First is going to be altitude, then our squawk code.
Squawk 01 is cleared to Santa Barbara Airport as filed. Climb and maintain 7,000 feet.
So that was the altitude we put in, which is good.
Is 127 decimal for squawk 0321. Clearance void 30 minutes from now.
Oops. 0321. Standby, enter, acknowledge. So our departure is the same frequency we already have tuned, so that is fine. We're just going to read that back, and we can see our Unicom is 1227. So if we go 1227, there we go. We got our good day, and then we can go ahead and transfer that over. We're going to select a runway for takeoff. We're taking off runway 22. And before we announce taxi, let's go ahead and just make sure that we are actually ready for our taxi. So again, we're just checking things over. We're going to go ahead and pop on our taxi lights now. Fuel quantities are fine. T's and P's are good. Altimeter is set. Our autopilot is set to our assigned altitude. We're going to be taking off with 0 flaps. We do not require them. Cowl flaps are open. Carb heat is closed. Everything else should be good to go. I do like to add a little bit of nose up trim for the default configuration. That helps out a little bit. Other than that, we are good to go. I'm just going to show you quickly our lights, because we might be landing just before dark. So we're going to go ahead and pop on floodlights on the top. Then underneath here you have a switch for your sort of dash lights, which are all across there. Underneath your yoke, that little button there turns on a sort of map light. Then we have our red floodlight, and then we have our panel and gauge light there. So we're going to leave it set up this way. And other than that, we are good to go. So we're going to give everything a quick little wiggle. That feels good. Give the rudder pedals a little wiggle. We're going to pop off the brakes. And the nice thing with this aircraft is that front nose wheel has a fair amount of travel on its shock. And you'll notice when I touch the brakes how much that compresses, which is very cool that they actually took the time to realize that this has that sort of nose wheel on there, where a lot of times developers won't put that sort of much movement in there because it's a little jarring, but it does add to the realism of how it taxis, and it does taxi very, very well. You want to use minimal braking though, and keep your speed sort of under control, which is tough on this taxiway because it is slightly downhill and it does get bumpy towards the end here right before you get on there, and sometimes you get like kind of like stuck in this little dip. So as far as our takeoff briefing goes, we're going to have zero flap. We're going to rotate around 55-60 knots. We're going to be looking for around 70 to 80 as our initial sort of climb out. We're then going to go ahead, this is where it gets all bumpy. We're going to go ahead and get our landing gear up, and then we can set our power to 23 inches of manifold pressure and 2400 RPMs and trim out for 100 knots. So we're down here at the end of the runway. I'm just going to bring up our map so we can have a look at that. And you can see really we're going to be kind of taking off straight out. I'm going to turn a little bit over so that way we can pick that up a little bit better. But otherwise we are good. So we're going to come over here. We're going to turn on our transponder to altitude reporting. Taxi lights off, landing lights on. We are configured. Landing gear is good to go. Lights are as required on the interior. Flaps are up. And here's where we're stuck in that little dip. There we go. So we're just going to do a rollout takeoff. No need to stop here. And we're just going to kind of fly manually initially. Having a look at that wind, it's looking pretty good. We'll probably need a little bit of left rudder as we come down the runway. Not too much at all, actually. There's 50, 55, 60. Let's go ahead and rotate. Takes off very smoothly. Looking for that initial climb there. We're doing good. We can go ahead and bring that gear up. We're clear of obstacles. We can go ahead and bring that power down to 2300 and 2400 RPMs. And then we're looking for 100 knots to trim out to. It trims out very easily. I've already got all backwards pressure off, and we're looking between 90 and 100 knots for our cruise. And we should hopefully get, yep, there goes our next leg. Already highlighted from the GTN 750, which is great. So we're just gonna manually fly this over. Man, the cloud layer in the on the island looks fantastic. So this flies very nice when you're hand flying. We do have pitch and rudder trim in this, so really you could trim this thing out very nicely. no need to engage the autopilot if you don't want to, but you know, it does make life easy. That's why we've got it, right? So the way the autopilot works for this is we're lining up right now to our actual flight plan. Man, it is gorgeous out. So as we are lining up to that, our airspeed is perfect for our climb. I do not have any backwards pressure on the controls at all, just getting us lined up. Now once I engage the autopilot, it's going to go into roll mode and it's going to lock onto our actual vertical speed. So click on that, it goes vertical speed. It was at 900 when I clicked it on, so there we go. And we can click nav, and then it's just going to get us right onto our course. Now as we're climbing out, as we get over 3,000 feet, you can start to lean out the engine, but we also want to make sure that our manifold pressure stays up at that sort of like 22, 23 range to get us the best performance. The RPMs will not change as we climb. They are set and good to go. And to get your mixture set, we're going to look at our EGT over here, and what you're going to do is you're going to back out that mixture, and it's going to go to what we call peak. So right there is peak, and on this aircraft you want to go 50 degrees rich of peak, so that's roughly just right about there, and that's going to give us the best performance. You can see we're still climbing out right at 100 knots. Life is good, everything is configured and set up. The only thing I forgot to do was contact departure. Should have done that a little sooner, but we'll go ahead and contact them now.
SoCal departure Sprocket 01 is passing 4,200 feet, climbing 7,000 feet.
Sprocket 01 SoCal departure altimeter 29.908. Continue to parole as planned.
Awesome. So we are good there. And they'll hand us off as we go. Like I said, they gave us our 7,000 foot flight altitude, which is great because that's what we chose. That looks really good with the landing gear up. It just takes a Cessna and makes it somewhat of a little sports car, doesn't it? I will admit it looks odd, but it is pretty cool that they've got it looking the way they do. And it's rare to see these out in the real world, so I'm glad that we've got it in the sim to fly. Alright, so let's have a look at a couple of the features on the GTN 750 while we're flying along here. I'm going to reduce, actually need to bring up the manifold pressure a little bit there, and I'm going to reduce our climb rate a little bit. And you can see this blue arc is now being reflected of where that actually is. So that is our top of climb. Once we get to our top of climb, we're going to set our cruise settings, which I'm going to do a relatively aggressive performance cruise where we're going to do 22 inches with 2,300 RPMs. Also going to start to lean this out again a little bit more. There's peak, so in roughly there. All right. So some of the cool things that we can have a look at on here, obviously we were looking at some of the charts and things, but if we come back to the home page and we have a look at the utilities page, this utility here is great where you can say, okay, let's use our sensor data, and it picks up all the information from the aircraft. So currently our true airspeed, our indicated airspeed is 105, 106. Outside air temperature is 17 degrees. Our ground speed, you know, our pressure altitude, all of that good stuff, true airspeed is all listed here, and our wind direction. Now there's also, if you're using the 530, a way to get your actual true airspeed. We're just locking on now to 7,000 feet, so I'm actually going to reduce down our RPMs here. Down to 2300, and we're pretty much already at 22 inches of manifold pressure. The only other step that we need to do is actually to close our cowl flaps, and we do not need carb heat at the moment, so we're fine there. So let's go have a look at our airspeed indicator over here, seeing as we're talking about true airspeeds. Now there's a couple of things that you need to know in order to get this to work. One is you're going to need to know the outside air temperature, which on this is in Fahrenheit. So you can either convert what's not written on here, or we can come up and have a look, and we're looking at 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So on this gauge here, we know that we are at 7,000 feet and that the temperature is 55 degrees. So if you rotate this, so there's 5,000 feet and there's 7,000 feet, and we're at 55 degrees. We can't quite get it perfect, but there is roughly 55 degrees, and you can see that this is saying 147-ish, 146. And if we look at our true airspeed here, we're doing 148. So those match up. It is accurate to set that way. Now that we're also in our cruise, I do want to do our mixture one last time just to make sure we got our fuel burn right. There's peak, and we want to come back in. We're pretty much already there, but let's do a little too far. Right around there. So our fuel burn right now, we're getting 12.4 gallons per hour. The other thing that is great on the GTN 750 is another utility under fuel planning. So you can see if we also use sensor data, it'll give us our current fuel flow, our ground speed, and then the fuel required from those waypoints. So that was the total fuel that it was saying that we were going to use. If you want to see how much fuel you need left, you can go mode and go flight plan, and this is going to be from your position to whatever leg that you're selecting. So it's saying right now that actually let's change that back. Oh, I think that's direct. That's why it's 7.5. If we use flight plan, it lets us know in the actual waypoints that we have. You can also select which waypoint you want to have a look at. So let's say Ventura, have a look, and you can say it's going to be 2.8 gallons. So you get to see a lot of information in here as far as your range, efficiency, endurance, all that good stuff. It's a very cool utility to use. So we can go ahead and just bring up now. We're going to split this back over.
Pocket 01 contact, Los Angeles Center on 134.575. Good day.
I think that she said 134.575. We'll acknowledge.
134.575
Yeah.
for sprocket 01.
We'll transfer that in, and then we can contact.
Los Angeles Center, sprocket
I think they hand us
01,
right back off to the next one.
Sprocket 01 Los Angeles Center altimeter 29.9er 6 continue to Doyle as planned. Sprocket 01
Yeah.
contact Los Angeles Center on 125.8. Good day.
Go ahead and acknowledge that.
125.8 sprocket 01.
And we can transfer and contact.
Los Angeles Center, sprocket 01, 7,000 feet.
So what I wanted to do here, just to get ready,
01 Los Angeles Center
is, where is, there's Santa Barbara.
Doyle as planned.
And we can go ahead and we're going to look up the waypoint info. We're going to come over to charts, approaches, select approach, and we are hoping for this VOR runway 25. Go ahead and make that full. There's a couple of bits of information we want to get off of here. Number one is going to be the actual VOR we need to tune, which is this one, 1138. So we can come up here, 1138, transfer that into place. I also like to be redundant and get that in here, put that in our nav 2. Next, we need to have a look at the course to fly in on, which is 279. So we can come over to our HSI here, if I can get this zoom to work correctly. There we go. And we want that to be at 279. So, right. I think there. And same on the nav. What's too far there? That seems about good. So there we are. We have that configured for our approach. What we are hoping to have happen is that ATC is going to give us the step downs we need to at least get on the approach and in touch and basically get clearance to do our own thing to land and get in touch with tower. That's kind of the idea. So we're going to keep on cruising along. We should have LAX off to our side here. Look at the map here. LAX should be right down. Map. Zoom on out. Yeah, just can't quite see it through that little bit of haze. There it is. Alright, so we're just going to fly along. I'll touch base with you guys once we get in touch with approach. And hopefully we're going to get the right assignment to use ATC all the way through.
Rocket 01, you are 42 miles southeast. Maintain present heading and altitude. Expect to be on runway 25 approach via Quang transition.
Alright, so we just got our actual transition and everything the way that we
Maintain present heading and altitude.
wanted it to go.
Runway 25 approach via Quang transition. Clear to Quang Sprocket 01.
So we're clear to Quang, which is actually our next waypoint as it is. Say you were on a different waypoint, you could do direct to that point. But we are set up nicely. We hopefully will get a altitude assignment here in a little bit to descend, and we can go ahead and get that started. Now, something to look at also on the utility page is on VNav. We can go ahead and 2100 is what we need for ZACs. So we can do 2100 feet. Typically I do about, let's say 750. And we want to be at 0. And target waypoint, we want to be at ZACs. So you can see that this is saying begin your descent at in basically 5.5 minutes. If we were to start it right now, it would basically be 400 feet per minute. We can display messages as well. Now, the only downside to that utility is that it only works if you're in a GPS mode. Because we're going to have to switch over to the VOR in a little bit once we get closer in, and it will no longer give us our vertical speed. But at that point, we'll already know and also be descending. Yeah, a little plane flying low down there. Look at him go. There we go. So we're just coming down to 6,000 feet. Hit Alt and then drop us down. Reduce that throttle. Go ahead and acknowledge. Now, something I wanted to talk about as we do this, if I can get a word in edgewise with this busy traffic in the LA area. So one of the best things about this aircraft is that the landing gear and first notch of flaps can be extended and deployed under 140. Now that makes approaches so easy for us to kind of control our speed to almost go as fast as you can until you don't need to anymore, because the amount of drag that comes from that landing gear and that first notch of flaps is substantial. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is the white arc on your airspeed indicator. Now, the airspeed indicator white arc doesn't always mean like your maximum speed for extension. A lot of times it means like full flaps or your sort of landing configuration flaps. There's two ways that you can check this. One is by actually having a look at the flap lever, and you can see underneath here, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. It's blocking the 4, but there you go. You can see 140 for your first notch is fine. And then the POH will also confirm that information if you're looking for it. So, like, even at this speed, we can sit here and go, boom, pop out the landing gear and the flaps and just slow us way, way down. So we're leveling off here at 6,000 feet. Hopefully we'll get another assignment here. Just double check and make sure I didn't miss anything. We're good. There we go. All right. See if I can get my words in here.
Tower on 119.7 sprocket 01. Santa Barbara Tower sprocket 0119 miles southeast inbound VOR runway 25 approach.
Sprocket 01 Santa Barbara Tower. Altimeter 29.95, wind 244 at 8. Cleared VOR runway 25
Okay, so they just gave us clearance, so we can descend as needed.
Cleared VOR runway 25 approach sprocket 01.
So we want to bring that down probably around 800 feet per minute. I'm going to go ahead and back off that throttle. And we can go ahead and actually switch over now to our VLOC because we're going to be doing the VOR approach. So if we come over to our map, hit the CDI, and you can see that it loaded that up. We were off just by a smidge of a degree. So there we go. We are good to go on that front. And looking at our blue arc here, we can adjust our rate of descent and our speed to try and get to Zach's at 2100. It is at or above, but we want to be as close to that as possible. So to go through a quick little landing briefing, we are going to land full flaps. We can drop this first notch at any point. We're still far enough out that I'm not worried about it. Lower our landing gear, and then introduce the flaps as needed as we're sort of coming in. We are looking for, I'm just going to confirm on the actual chart here for our speeds. So airspeed with flaps down, we're looking between 65 and 75 knots. We're going to adjust our trim, touch down main wheels first, and then lower that nose wheel as gently as possible and minimal braking. Our actual descent, or before landing, I should say, is the only thing we really want to check there is that our carb heat is actually on before we fully close the throttle. And that is because we don't want that carburetor to freeze without that heat from the engine. We also can go ahead and start to bring our mixture back in. We can just go ahead and go full rich at this point. And after that, it's just going to be high RPMs on our propeller, on our prop. So full forward there, and then we will be pretty much configured to land. But everything's looking really nice. I'm actually going to introduce that notch of flaps. And actually, because we're going to go slower, I can then actually bring this up so we're not descending as aggressively, back to around that 700-800 mark. And then if we zoom in, we can see whereabouts we're going to hit, which is looking pretty good. I'll take that for a non-precision approach. And really, I mean, we have the runway in sight, so we're already, you know, above our minimums and can see the runway, so we're good to go. But if we wanted to, we could take this, and I would say, because our decision height is like 920, I think it was, we could set this to 1,000 and that will hold us at the altitude for our decision, which if we go back and look at that chart, you notice on the step downs, that's what it's doing. From 2100, it's basically getting us to that 920, and then if we can't see it by the time we're half a mile out, then that's when we would you know, go around. You can see our little aircraft flying along there, letting us know whereabouts we are, which is always nice to see. At this point, I'm going to actually split this, and I'm going to actually bring up our parking information and have that ready to go. I selected it. There it is. Just took a minute to load. Make that full, zoom on in, and I like to come off onto this sort of mic, and then they usually give us mic echo and over. All right, so we got Bombardier on final, which I'm not seeing, but we got our clearance, so that is good. I'm going to go ahead and start to really slow us down here. Oh. So that horn is for landing gear when you're underneath, I think it's 11 inches of manifold pressure. So let's go ahead and drop that landing gear down.
Did you hear my last transmission?
I did, I'm sorry.
Cleared to land runway 25, sprocket 01.
So now we can start to bring that back even more to get that airspeed under control. We're going to level off here in just a little bit, and that'll make it nice and easy for us to introduce our second notch of flaps. But this is how a VOR approach works, is that, you know, basically up on this hill is that VOR. We're tuned to fly in on that heading, and then once we get close enough to see the actual runway, at our decision height, we'll be able to disengage. So here we are, just leveling off at 1,000 feet. I'm going to bring in a little bit of power as that happens. I'm also going to bring our prop full forward at this point, and we can go ahead and introduce that second notch of flaps. End of the runway is right here. I'm going to go ahead and disengage the autopilot, and we can actually start to nose down a little bit because we are a little high. Watching that airspeed. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do final notch of flaps. We're getting a little bit pushed around. Going a little slow. Got some altitude to lose though. So we're looking to touch down and hop off on that, I think that's Mike is the actual taxiway and exit there.
121.7 for Bombardier 9er Sierra Sierra.
Kind of interesting, I don't see, I never saw that other aircraft, so I don't know why that didn't get injected. A little choppy on the entrance here, but that's okay. It should balance out nicely. We're going to go for those main wheels first. Going to be kind of a nose up attitude here as we got a little far. Wanted to be down before those markers. There we are at idle. Gonna hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. There's the main wheels down. There we go. Looks like we can still get our exit with minimal braking. Great. Flaps coming up. And we're coming off. Go ahead and landing lights off, taxi lights on. We can go ahead and get our transponder back over onto standby. And we can enter that. Actually, go back. And then acknowledge that.
121.7 for sprocket 01. Gate for Alpha via taxiway Mike Alpha, cross runway, tree, left
They
Alpha,
want us to
cross
go...
runway, tree, right, Alpha Bravo, sprocket 01.
Okay, so they're having us cross actually here. So that is fine too. Typically I go down and then across, but they gave us good instructions anyways, because Bravo is the one that runs up that way. So we are good.
Sierra, continue taxi.
So we're just going to roll over here and act like this little Cadillac's ours.
Hold position. Caution the C182 RG on the taxiway. Bombardier 9er Sierra,
All right,
Sierra,
there we
continue
are. We're
taxi.
going to go ahead and pop on our parking brake. We're going to get that guy to be quiet. We can just go ahead and let's just pop in some nonsense here. So shutting down on this one is fairly straightforward. You know, we want to go through and actually turn off all our electronics, make sure that our lights are off. We'll leave our beacon on, but nav light can come off. We're going to go ahead and turn off our avionics, and then we can make sure that all these are off. That is off. That is off. And then we can reset our true airspeed dial there. And after that, we are pretty much good to go ahead and pull the mixture closed. And we'll shut down. There we go. And then we can go ahead and turn off our battery and our alternator mags and our ignition over to off. And then they want in the official POH for your tank to be on the right hand side. And then after that, we are good to go. We can go ahead and just pop on our static elements if we want to and have a little look around. We don't need the tow bar on. And let's go have a little peruse here. Overall, I would say that was a lot of fun. There's not really any bugs that stood out to me as an issue. And the only thing is the in-game checklist is incorrect, and that autopilot is always on, which it should not be. But otherwise, this thing flew absolutely beautifully, and including that GTN 750, it works out very nicely, especially when you have you know, a Navigraph subscription and the premium version. I did test out things like stall horns and stall characteristics. The stalls were aggressive in this, and I don't know if that was because the landing gear was up, but it definitely wanted to spin on me instead of just dipping the nose. Don't know if that is real to life or not, but it definitely had an aggressive stall. The stall horns work great. The landing gear warning, we heard that coming in. That works fine. So it's a simple aircraft, but the stuff that's in there was working appropriately. So that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed the flight. If you have any questions, comments, please leave them down below. And if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate a like and subscription to see more. Until next time, take care.